Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. I'm Justin. I'll be your host tonight, and short crew here today. It's just me and Cody. We are
I am
here
over
to,
6 feet tall, I'll have you know.
I mean, you know what I meant. We're short-staffed at work, short-staffed here. Why not? But we're here to keep Spooktober, on rolling, and I'm really looking forward to talking about the subject today. But before we do that, let's see what's been going on. Cody, what's new?
I did do something today that I'm going to share with Justin, and nobody else is going to hear this little ditty unless they
Ooh.
happen to listen to this episode. It does involve my Halloween party. And
Ooh.
I was saying before we got on the air that I did manage to do one thing this morning before my day turned into chaos, but the thing I did today was something I'm sure people who have been following my party progress and or come to the party on the day of are going to assume I would have done a long time ago. But I only did it today, which was go through and actually inventory my TVs and the systems I have to see that I actually had enough TVs that could play the right systems.
Oh man.
That happened today, ladies and gentlemen, early October, mere weeks before the party. Now it was funny because I think I may have mentioned before, I knew what this theme was going to be this year quite a while ago into last year. And so I think as early as like last May or June, I think I picked up my first free TV off of Facebook in preparation for knowing that I was going to need a shit ton of TVs for this party. And so I've been grabbing them and gathering them, and actually pretty proud. I mean, when you see how many TVs that we'll have here for the party, I think I paid a total of like 40 or $50 for the entire lot of all of the TVs that we're gonna have here. So I did a really good job being vigilant
Wow.
and like looking for free listings all year round, and so that's not where I spent all the money at, but other places I did, I'm sure. But so then I made the arcade cabinets that I wanted to do for a lot of the games, and I was telling my wife here just as we were making dinner that I made seven of them, just kind of assuming that I would have seven systems that would need that type of TV. And when I went through, first thing I did this morning was I went to every TV in the house and wrote down like what TV I was going to identify it as, what type of inputs it had. And then
Hmm.
I went around and found all of the video game systems, including digging through some storage for a few. And I was like, okay, what kind of cords do these need to plug into TVs? Inventoried those. Then I sat down finally and like cross-referenced the two lists. And I was like, okay, this one can go on here and this one can go here. And the first time I did it, ended up with a video game cabinet that I didn't have a system for. And I was like, if you were fucking telling me that I built one of these things for nothing, luckily I was able to revise one small thing and I managed to not only match up exactly the number of cabinets, which I'm glad I didn't build more, um, for what I needed, but also I have several games. I'll let it be a little mystery here, but I have several games that could not work with the format of the arcade cabinets themselves. So
Ooh.
I had to find some specific other ways to make those happen. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yes, yes. Space at the house is at a premium, I will say, for this one again. It didn't seem bad at first, but then it just kept getting bigger. And I haven't actually started moving things around to see how it's all going to fit yet, but I have expanded into at least one room I was not planning to before, so we'll see where it all ends
Oh,
up at the end.
wow. I mean,
But
I gotta say, man, I have nothing but admiration for the sheer amount of effort you put into this every year, and especially this year. This sounds like just an unbelievable amount of work.
yeah, I actually found out at the very end once I had the whole list cross-referenced that I unbelievably can actually get another TV yet if I so happen to find one and play one more system yet that doesn't have a TV. So I was
Oh
pretty
wow,
pretty crazy. But anyway.
wow.
Anyway, yeah, so Wednesday we'll do a couple more reveals and get this puppy rolling pretty soon here. But what have you been up to, Justin?
Oh man, I kind of feel bad for saying that I'm tired today in light of all of that, but I generally tend to be a bit of an introvert, and I have been nothing but social this entire weekend. I mean, all the stuff has been fun. It's been primarily game related. Like yesterday, I ran a game of Mothership for a bunch of friends,
Oh,
and
that's right. How'd that go?
it was a lot of fun. For the listeners, Mothership, if you listen to our Eclipse Phase game or our episode, it's similar to that, but pared down a lot. It uses a similar system with the D100s. It also is kind of near future sci-fi, but it's instead of being really focused on like corporate espionage and political intrigue and whatnot, it's really more the universe is hungry and it wants to eat you. It
Oh,
leans a lot more into the horror side of things. And yeah, I ran like a little 2-page module that I spent $5 on, and it gave us at least 3 hours of content, which is amazing to me. And yeah, it's a really fun system, leaves a lot of room for improvisation for the players to just come up with things. It's like, hey, can I do this? And yeah, as long as it makes sense, there's a good chance they can do it. And it's very freeform, and I love that. Um, but yeah, my weekend has been full of a lot of that sort of thing. Earlier today, inspired by that, one of our friends wanted to get a different game running, so we got characters kind of rolled up for that. A different sci-fi setting, just Savage Worlds with the sci-fi kind of module for it, and Savage Worlds is kind of like a settingless system. I'm not going to get too much into detail,
mhm.
but I spent a good chunk of the afternoon, with my wife and some other friends, making up characters for that. It's been a really busy weekend, but it's been a fun one. It has left me kind of drained though, but not too drained to jump into another episode, especially with the topic we're talking about today. Uh, so today we are talking about a surprisingly under the radar horror game called Tormented Souls. Um, it came out, I believe, 2 years ago, I want to say. Let me check the Steam page real quick. 3 years ago, August of
Oh, wow.
2021. Um, and I remembered seeing a little bit about it when it came out. And it was like, okay, that looks kind of nice. It looks very reminiscent of Resident Evil. Then I heard some of the voice acting, and it's like, I don't know. So I sat on this one for a while. Um, but the sequel was announced recently, and it's going to come out, I think, sometime next year. So it seemed like a good idea, a good time to jump in, see if this was at all worth checking out. So before we really get into it, had you heard of this one before we decided to talk about it, Cody?
I don't think so. You shared this with us, I believe. I just saw your background PS with the number two on it, which I
Mhm.
didn't. Before you said that, I saw the picture and I was like, oh, I didn't know there was a two coming out. So, no, I hadn't heard of this, but the concept basically, I don't know if you pitched it to me or if I watched the trailer or what it was, but basically it was like the original early Resident Evil games, kind of like, well, you'll get into it, but like fixed camera angles and giant mansion type stuff, and that had me intrigued because I was a pretty big fan of the old school tank control Resident Evil games, and we can talk about in this one whether or not that control scheme holds up. But yeah, no, I hadn't heard about this before, but I was pretty excited. I was a quick buy-in for you to find somebody to play this one. So
Cool. Um, so yeah, I remember, it got a little bit of buzz when it was first announced, and the reviews on Steam, despite certain like rough edges in like the trailers and stuff, they're still very positive. They've pretty much always been very positive as far as I can tell. And yeah, so it was one of those things where, well, it, I didn't know what to make of it, but it was on sale at one point and decided to check it out. So yeah, as you said, it is very much an old school Resident Evil style game. Um, it does have the option of tank controls, but I think there was also the option to have it switch to more modern controls depending on your preferences. Um, but I guess let's kind of start with that. Did you think tank controls and like the fixed camera angles and all that? Do you think that still works in a modern horror game, or do you think we've moved beyond that? And did you think it felt dated?
I was going to ask, what did you play this on first?
PC.
PC. Okay, I was kind of hoping that because I played it on the Switch, big surprise.
Ah,
But I wanted to get the different perspective on that, so that's good.
sure.
Um, I will be honest, as soon as I saw the button mapping, I guess, if you will, on the option screen,
Mhm.
I very quickly was like, I'm probably not going to use the tank controls on this. I think the tank controls, well, it's interesting because the tank controls are very hard to use in today's world, but even the like updated ones was still a form of tank controls with like
Kinda.
if you were running and then the screen switched to a different perspective, you had to continue holding the button the way you had it.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you would stop turning the other around and start going the other way.
Mhm.
So there were some moments where that was a little weird, but I definitely think like the true tank controls, I was done with that. I didn't need to really try it as much. The joystick has, kind of just changed gaming, but um I should say the thumb nub joystick.
Analog stick. Yeah.
Sorry, Atari and other companies. I didn't mean to put you under the bus there. Um, Now, the fixed camera angles was interesting because there were a lot of times where, in like the old Resident Evil games, they would use those fixed camera angles specifically to create the horror, right? Because
Yeah.
you'd walk into an office with all the cop desks and you'd hear like something groaning, but you couldn't see where or what it was yet
Mhm.
until you turned a corner, and then you'd risk the chance of bumping into it, or you might see it across the room, or whatever the case was. And there
Mhm.
were some times in this game where I thought that was played up very well. Like I could hear something shambling in the room, but I didn't know where it was or if I was in danger or not. So you'd
Mhm.
kind of, I'd enter a room and I'd pause and just like wait to see if the sound got louder,
Louder.
or if it seemed like something was coming after me, or if I could proceed ahead. But there were also some points later in the game, I will say, where it felt like the fixed camera angle kind of had the opposite effect on me, where I was just like frustrated with like, I don't know if I'm going to die if I like take another step forward or not right now, because some of the guys were a little stronger, and there were a couple types of enemies, not a ton in this game, but
Mhm.
so mixed bag for me, I would say, but for what it was, I enjoyed the nostalgic feel.
Okay.
I'll say that. I don't know that I'd want to play like every game in today's gaming environment in this style, but how about you?
Um, I do agree that it was effective at times, but I wasted so much ammo shooting at something that I figured had to be just off screen, and
Hmm.
then not noticing any difference in the footsteps, not having it like lurch into view, and then it's like, okay, I guess I'll nudge a little forward, and finally the angle shifts, and it's like, oh, it's nowhere near me.
I was
Um,
shooting the wall.
Whereas if I was that character, I would have been able to see that. And that bothered me a little bit because it's like
Hmm.
I would not have wasted those shots if I could have like looked in front of me and said and seen that okay, it's nowhere near my field of vision. Um so I don't know. I mean, I like some of the setups, like some of them were very artistic, some of or at least very good in framing what was there and making you kind of question like what you were about to get into, but it does highlight the limitations, especially when you, like you said, paired with the modern control scheme. Because yeah, all of a sudden it switches, and you say like you're holding right, and then the camera shifts to behind you, so you're going forward on the screen but still holding right, and then
Yeah,
yeah, it's awkward.
I felt like that part would confuse a more modern gamer. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume people would be able to acclimate after a
Yeah,
bit, but Um, I do want to touch on the control scheme because this
please.
is the first of a couple of bugs I ran into. So you'll get like a little tutorial. It's like a piece of paper you pick up or something, and then like scroll down the back, it's got like the controls, and it says it's defaults to the tank controls where like forward is move forward, left is
Hmm.
turn left, right is turn right, and then hold a button to run. But if you're using the thumbstick, just naturally, it defaults to modern controls, and pressing the run button does nothing. And it took me probably an hour or two to realize, oh, if I'm using the thumbstick, I'm always running. And the run button only does something if you're using the D-pad for the tank controls, which was not explained in the game itself.
Yeah.
Um, so that I thought was a bit weird. And it could have used a bit of polish in terms of explaining stuff like that. Um, But I suppose before we get too much further, we
Well,
should
let me
say,
jump in on that,
oh,
Justin, because I'm
oh,
curious.
okay,
So you're playing on PC, but you're essentially using like a standard gaming controller then?
yeah, yeah, just like the
Okay.
one I got off of a third party one I got off of Amazon a while back.
Okay. I would have, can you play this with the mouse and keyboard?
You can, and I think if you do, it defaults to the tank controls.
Okay.
So, I mean, that it would be a very different experience.
Um,
But yeah, so I
I
decided
was
this. Yeah.
I was happy you told me about the run button because that was confusing me. I just gave up and was like, okay, you can't run. And
Mhm.
I don't know if it was the same on your controller or not, but the possibly, no, probably the single biggest issue I had with this game was a controller issue, which
Yeah.
um, it did ruin my experience somewhat. Now, we'll
Oh,
talk later how much it did, but I don't know if your controller set up the same or not, but the run button was also the map button, and that
oh.
drove me nuts.
I think with the controller, I was using like an Xbox style controller, and I think the run button was X, and the map button was you like clicked the right stick, and that brought it up. So yeah, it wasn't the same for me.
Okay, so interestingly, when they show the controller on the Switch version, when you go into the screen or if it's on one of those papers you get or whatever, I can't remember. But when they show it to you, they show the map button on the right joystick.
Mhm.
When you play the game, the map is on the left joystick. The left
Ooh.
joystick is also your movement button in the game. If you press in your movement button, it stops the fight you're in the middle of and pulls up the fucking map.
Oh no.
Anytime you found a guy who jumped out from around a corner or you were like panicking because you were fighting a mini boss, you would, of course, naturally jam the button to get away as quick as you could, which would inevitably bring up the map,
Oh no.
ruining the tension and having to leave the map screen and then try to figure out what fucking direction you were trying to run at that moment as well. I don't
Oof.
understand why it was this way. Now, I will also be fair, I did not play around a lot with the control options on that screen, but the mapping clearly showed like it was going to be this joystick on the right.
Huh.
More interestingly still, I don't believe the right joystick was used for anything in the Switch version. So I really can't explain this, but that was probably actually my single biggest issue with this game.
Wow. Yeah, I think the only thing the right analog stick was used for in the PC or like the PC version was navigating like your inventory and stuff. If you didn't want to use the D-pad, you could like do a more smooth movement over in the inventory and puzzles and things with the right stick.
Hmm.
I think. But yeah, that is a weird glitch, or at least choice on their part for the Switch version. That's
I mean, I would go
bizarre.
so far as to say it was one of the worst controller mishaps that I've seen on a Switch game.
Ooh,
And I have
ouch.
to,
Okay.
I'm going to have to dock it a little bit for that alone. So,
Oh, and that's fair. I probably would too if I had run into the same sort of thing. But before we get too much further, we probably should at least say what the game's about,
nah.
besides just
Okay,
a
what do we
Resident
got?
Evil style. Um, I mean, it is. You did touch on it a little bit. It takes place in like a big, quote unquote, abandoned mansion, full of monsters. But the setup is you play a woman whose name is, oh God, what actually
Caroline,
was
I
her?
think.
Caroline
Yeah.
Walker, who gets a letter in the mail and who, in her own words, she says, "I never get letters," and it's just strange. It's a strange dialogue choice until you realize the game was made by a team from Chile, so English probably isn't their first language. So I'm willing to give them a little bit of a pass on
Oh,
the voice acting
really?
and some of the
Okay.
writing. Yeah. But she gets a letter in the mail with a photograph of two young girls, and on the back of it is scrawled something like, "How could you leave us there?" And she, upon reading that, she gets this splitting headache and basically decides, okay, something weird is going on here. I should try to see where this, what this is all about. So there's an address in the letter. She goes there, promptly gets knocked unconscious, and wakes up in a bathtub, missing her eye. Uh, and
With a breathing tube down her throat,
yes, yeah,
naked.
yeah, that was another thing that kind of made me sleep on this for a little bit because I saw like the opening cinematic like on some Let's Play, and within like a minute or two of starting the game, it's like she's like just completely nude, just standing up out dripping water out of a bathtub. I'm like, okay, this is just like a cheesy fan service kind of game. It's gonna suck. So I didn't really think pay it much mind until I saw the consistently very positive Steam reviews, and I'm like, maybe there is something to this. So a bit of a dodgy start in terms of all that, but it does get significantly better as it goes, I think, in terms of atmosphere and how it all plays out. But yeah, you wake up in that bathtub. You have no idea really who did this to you, where your eye is, what's going on, or how to get out.
Hmm.
And that's the setup for the game. And of course, as you go, you find out there's something much, much darker going on, and you have to try and survive and stop something terrible from happening. I don't want to spoil too much right here. Um, did you like the story overall once it really got going?
Uh, that's a hard question for me to answer. I feel like there were a lot of elements of the story in this game that I really, really enjoyed, and there were some elements of the story in this game that I wish they would have went a different direction with.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
I think I'll
Do
just leave it at
we,
that for now.
yeah, we can get into some details later. Um, I, for a good chunk of it, there isn't a lot of story aside from finding out where what's going on and how to get out. But bit by bit, you do start to piece things together. There's like, it's told in your classic survival horror epistolary format where it's through journal entries and
Yeah.
recordings and things. And you start to piece together the history of this hospital where you've ended up, and what's happened there, why it's abandoned, and the dark history of the guy who owned it. Um, and it starts to get really kind of weird after a while, especially when you start finding the VHS tapes. Like, I still don't know if I like how that element fit in. It made for some neat puzzles, but thematically, I don't know if it fit. Um,
Didn't like it.
Fair enough. Well, okay, let's talk about the puzzles then, since we're sort of on the subject. Did you like them overall? Did you like how many there were, the way they were designed? Did you think there were too many?
Uh, Thinking back again to those like old Resident Evil games, you'd have to find a key, or there'd be like a light puzzle, or there'd be these kind of pretty minor puzzles. I thought this game was a really nice homage to those style of puzzles.
Mhm.
Um, I thought the puzzles in this game, for the most part, were pretty good. I thought there was a decent variety of like number puzzles and like water pipe puzzles, and there
Mhm.
were some puzzles I didn't particularly enjoy, such as the music puzzle, which I think you and I both vented out a little bit. I
Yes.
was not great at the music puzzles in the old Resident Evil games. I recognize that at this point those are like a staple of horror games as well, but
This
I
one
don't
was particularly bad
I'm just like tone
because
deaf and I didn't know what to do at all with that one.
I once I found that, like, minor spoilers for this particular puzzle, but it involves like a phonograph record with like a recording of somebody kind of humming or singing off key. You play it and it just goes and, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And there's another thing in the room that you play that in that opens up where if it's like a pedestal with a bunch of buttons on it, and if you press them, they play not sounds of people humming, they play musical notes. And you're supposed to
Hmm.
like match the notes to the sort of off-key humming, and I swear it didn't match up the way it was supposed to. I That was like the one puzzle I absolutely disliked.
I felt like I always had trouble like just picking up tones, period, like that. If they're isolated, like if you want me to sing along with the song, I can usually do fairly pitch accurate stuff, but if like I also didn't even know how many notes I was supposed to put in. Like I was convinced it was like a three-note puzzle, so I was like beep boop boop, beep boop boop,
Oh,
beep boop boop boop, beep boop boop boop. I'm gonna look this up. I don't know what I'm doing here. And
yeah.
then they were like, you need six notes. And I was like, never would have gotten that in 100 years.
Yeah, this is the one of the few puzzles I actually had to look up an answer to as well because it was not clicking for me. A lot of the other ones though were really creative though. Like there's one that involves a floppy disk where, it's they do the little cheeky thing where if you don't flick the tag on the back, it's like, oh, it's write protected, and it's like, okay, that's funny. And
That
then,
that was
but no,
good.
there's a lot more to it than that, and the amount of thought they put into just this one little archaic object to put a puzzle together, I thought, just brilliant.
Yeah.
Um,
One
And
puzzle that I oh go ahead, sorry.
no, go on. It's fine.
Oh, I was just say one puzzle that I really struggled with. Um, and it's not going to be for why you think it was the so in the one point in the game you basically obtain like a key that you can program more or less, like turn the pieces on it to make whatever you need the key to look like, and then it opens various doors throughout the mansion that you've been like, how do I open these doors like up to that point?
Mhm.
And I don't know if it was my TV or the brightness or the settings or being colorblind or what. I didn't see anything on the door handles. And so
Oh,
I was like I got the first one or two because they give you like the little paper with the clue on it, right? And it was like
yeah.
this plus this is this thing or whatever. And I was like, okay, so I got those. But then there was the
Mhm.
one that was like the heads of the different people. You
Mm.
were like
Yeah.
supposed to guess like what corresponded with that. And I was like, I don't even see anything on this. Like, what am I looking for?
Oh,
And so I finally looked that up because like I don't even then they were like, for this one, do this. And I was like, where's that at? Like, I don't even see
oh
that
man.
shape. So I don't know if it was just the lighting in the room that day or what. I mostly played this at night, but there was a time or two I did sneak in a day session here or there. So I don't know if that was
Gotcha.
part of it or what. But yeah, I really struggled with that one.
Oh, yeah. If you aren't able to see like half of the puzzle, that yeah, that would be really hard. Um, but in general, I think the puzzles were like one of the strongest parts of this game. When they worked the way they were supposed to. Yeah, there was ones that involve clocks. There's ones that involve like, replicating a series of knocks on a door. There's,
Hmm.
just a whole bunch of different and creative things that I haven't really seen this level of thought put into puzzles in a survival horror game in a really long time.
Yeah,
Um,
agreed. Really liked it.
yeah, and to make things better, it's an old school style horror game, but you don't have limited inventory space. You can
Yes.
carry like a doorknob and like in a shotgun and like all these things along with you, and you don't have to worry about like shoving them in a box. Uh, that was a great quality of life choice, and yeah, I was very happy to see that you didn't have to like swap things out.
Yeah,
Especially
that's a good
because
point.
especially because I ended up with like so much ammo towards the end of the game.
Oh,
Um,
geez, lucky.
I, well, I will say, okay, yeah. How did you feel about like the resource management, like the ammunition, the healing items, the
Hmm.
save things? Did you feel like it was just right, too stingy, too generous?
I'm actually going to put this down as one of my highest marks I'm going to give the game. I thought it was a near perfect slash perfect balance of ammo, health, even weapon upgrades, availability of rooms to visit, and enemies. I thought it was just about perfect, to be honest. Like there was
Nice.
a time or two where I was like, I need to find some ammo, and there was a time or two where I was like, I need to find some health, or like I need to avoid this room because this guy's in here, or like what rooms do I need to go to again right now? But I thought overall it was like it seemed like, and I'm sure every game obviously does have like a zillion play tests, but it
Mhm.
really seemed like this one they were like, we got these numbers tweaked perfectly to make this work. That was one of my favorite parts of the entire game, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely agree, especially because it uses the old style save system where you have limited numbers of in this game it's like reel to reel tape. You have limited numbers of those that you find and that you can use to save. And there were times where it's like I was playing it before work and I'm like, I have 20 minutes before I need to actually start getting ready. And then like 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, sweet mercy. There's one of the tape reels. And yeah, it just they plotted it out pretty much almost like they were designing it for people who were grown up and had obligations. And I liked that.
It's interesting you
Um,
said that because there was a night or two I didn't play it because I was like, I'm afraid that I'm going to get into this and not find the next place to save.
there were a couple of sections where it felt like it was a significantly longer between like save points, at least. Like I would have the tapes to save with, but it's like I don't want to run back there and use it here. I want to find the next spot so I don't have to backtrack all this way. And oh God, some of those later areas with where it's like a maze.
Yeah.
I was really not certain I was going to find a place where, to save without dying.
Or
Um,
there's some parts too where I felt like the map opened up in such a way that they kind of tricked you, where it was like you were at a save that you started the game at that day, and you went like just a little ways, and like I found another save room, and you were like, oh,
sometimes, yeah.
like I don't need to save right away, and then like you'd go a really long ways, to where thankfully I was like, this is gonna go south somewhere really quickly here, so I'm gonna backtrack, find a save room, and say,
Mhm.
and I did that most of the time, but there was like I think one time that I lost like an hour plus of stuff, and I was like, God
Mhm.
damn it! Like the
Yeah,
pains these new gamers don't know about.
I had a few moments like that too, but by and large, I was usually able to like limp my way back to to a safe place most of the time. Um, you mentioned the map though. Did you feel the map did a good job? Like, was it well laid out enough or
So it did take me a little bit to realize how they were color coding the map. And I saw some people online complaining, or
Mhm.
maybe being oblivious, I guess I should say, like I was at the beginning. So typically in the old games, like if it was a room that was unlocked, it'd be green, and then like if it was locked, it'd be red, or there'd be like some maps that show you like the symbol of the key you needed or whatnot.
Yeah.
And this one, like they made the hallways green and they made like the rooms red. And it was like, well, I
Mhm.
don't know which rooms I can get in right now. Like I can't tell at a quick glance. And it
Yeah.
was even weirder because they put those little like icons on some of the rooms. Like this one needs the twisty key, this one has the
Mhm.
computer in it, this one has whatever. But that seemed really I don't know,
Random?
it did have like no rhyme or reason to the system of that. Because there were some times where I was like, I need this other thing, and I don't know what room that was in.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm used to like the Silent Hill games. You find a map and, say you're going along a street and you see like a giant hole in it and you pull out your map again and your character has like taken a pen from somewhere and like scribbled out on that section of road showing that it's impassable. I would have loved something like that here
Mm.
because I would find like a key. Yeah, it was very clearly a key that goes to something or like the floppy disk and it's like, oh crap, which door was that to again? And I actually a couple of times I just looked up a guide because I didn't want to like run back and forth all the way through the mansion trying to remember where this one door I hadn't seen in 2 hours was.
That's a good point
Um,
because there was a room. Geez, I'm trying to remember where it was at. If it was on the east side or the west side of the hospital or what floor it was on even, but there was like a whole, it was like the north end of one of the four maps, if you can picture what I'm talking about.
okay.
And I was like, at one point, I was like, I don't know where to go right now. And there was like that last hallway that was like at the top of one of the four maps. I can't think which one it was, but I had never apparently been up there because it was blocked. And I just
Is that like the one
assumed
that
I
led to the
must have
laundry
been in
room
there
or
at one
whatever?
point. Say it again.
Is that the one that like led to the laundry room? Because I think I forgot about that one too until
Oh,
I
maybe it was. That was like the bottom left, right?
but
No worries.
yeah, there was a section like that too where it's like I thought I had gone everywhere and then I think it was like after I found the flashlight and you can't attack enemies in the dark.
That's what it
Uh
was, I think.
Yep. Yeah, same area, I think. And it's like, well, I'm pretty sure I've gone everywhere that I need to go. Where do I go next? And I looked up a guide and it's like, oh, I guess I haven't been back there. And sure enough, there was like one of those guys strapped to the wall
Yeah.
that'll like slash you as you go by if it's dark. But I had the flashlight, so I didn't need to hold a lighter in my hand, so I could just like beat him to death with a crowbar. And it's like, oh, new area. Okay.
Well, let's
Um,
talk about that for a second because that was
mm,
really unique in this game was how they used light, I thought. So you
yeah,
essentially have a lighter for most of the game, or at least the first half of the game, you have like a lighter, and if you have the lighter in your hand, you can't use a weapon, which I thought was really kind of creative.
yeah.
Not sure why I couldn't use one of both hands. Maybe it's too anyway. But that was kind of
Stability, maybe.
creative because you'd have to like find actual candles to light as you went through the hospital, and
Yeah.
you'd find like you said, a guy like strapped to the wall ready to kill you, but you were like, I can't do anything to you because if I put the lighter away, it wouldn't let you attack the people,
No.
even if you knew where they were. I did want to
Mhm.
ask, did you ever stay in the dark long enough to see what happens?
I stayed in it long enough that the screen started going weird, but I never I never stood there and just let the eventual end come. So I don't know
Okay.
actually what results from that.
Yeah, I didn't either. It said something like the darkness is coming or something, but I
Mhm.
was like, I gotta put the lighter back on. I can't see what this was.
Yeah, but yeah, I like that element too because it forced you to kind of think strategically. Like, okay, this is a dark area. I hear things, moving around me. I don't see any candles. I just got to book it, and I hope you were heading the right way. And that really did add to the atmosphere a lot.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because it's a matter of I know I could fight these things, but I can't see them well enough to fight them. So it was a very nice balance of being able to fight back and rendering you defenseless in certain situations. I like that.
Yeah, I thought the actual lighting effects in the game also were some of the best really seen in the game as far as how they made use of it, because like you
Mhm.
said, you'd have, a room where you'd hear stuff, and then you'd have like your lighter as you're slowly walking through that room, and then like there were quite a few times like I would walk up to a bad guy who just happened to be looking in the other direction, and I would just turn around and walk back out of the room.
Yep.
But it was so cool just to have those moments, or like even with the flashlight later, there were some times when you'd walk up onto people and you're like, oh shit.
Mhm. Or like I will say with the lighter, I kept expecting it to run out of fuel. Like I was
Mm,
using that thing very, very sparingly for a good chunk of the game.
interesting, yeah.
Same with the flashlight. I kept expecting the batteries to die, and thankfully they don't. But yeah, I really did like the fact that even if you did run into something, there was a chance it might not notice you, and but it was still like huge and like menacing, and it could rip you to shreds if it happens to turn around. It was very tense at parts. I like that. Um,
Absolutely. The shadow effects were really good too with whatever lighting source you had. Like if it wasn't the direction you were shining it, like it was black behind you still, which was really
yeah,
cool, I thought.
and yeah, I do agree. The great shadows. There's a section like in the sewers, where I don't know if you're using. I think you have the flashlight by that point. You have to have the flashlight by that point. But
Yeah, I
there's
think
some
so.
tunnels where, as you're going down them, it's like the light reflects in such a way that your shadow is like you can still see it behind you, but it's distorted, so it looks like this big lumbering thing that's just
Mm,
kind of following along. It's so subtle, but it's so effective, and it was just creepy as hell.
yeah, super cool.
Um, yeah. Let's see. Da, 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 da. I'm just seeing stuff we haven't covered yet. Did the map? Um, you mentioned having trouble finding your way around. This also brings in something that could have been found in like the quality testing. Because there are a handful of NPCs in this game. Not many, but there's a couple. And there's one point in the game where there's this priest character that you end up talking to, and he gives you a clue as to where to go next. He's like, "Oh, the office. That's on, he says it's on like the second floor of the East Wing, but the subtitles at the bottom say the second floor of the West Wing, and that is something
Mm,
that they should not have let get through, like quality assurance. And thankfully the map did have that room labeled, but at the
yeah.
time it's like, wait, what? So
Oh, interesting.
yeah, and so there are some rough edges there, and I was like, that and the thing with the controls were almost the only glitches I ran into. There was one other where it was because I did something I wasn't supposed to, I think. Possibly two others, but I'll talk about this one
Yeah,
first.
that the priest that you bump into just because of the way the fixed camera angles work. There was
Mm.
one or two times where I was like running around in a room, like looking for items, and then like the camera would switch, and I was like literally like bumping into the guy, and I was like, oh,
Yes.
oh, oh,
Another thing that if you could see what your character was seeing, it wouldn't have been an issue. But yeah, no,
yeah.
I had that happen. Um, but yeah, I do want to talk. Did you run into any actual like bugs or glitches when you were playing? Because
Um,
there were a couple I wanted to talk about since my mind was on them.
Go ahead. I'll think. I'm not nothing's
Okay,
jumping out right away, but let me think.
so the big one, which I was worried this was going to persist for the entire game from that point onward, it was during a certain puzzle where you're looking at the thing you're interacting with, but it also has your inventory up on the side, and it's basically you're setting like a time and a date. And it's like, oh, you can set the date. There's like dates in all of these journals that I've been finding. It's probably one of these. So I would just go, through the tabs on my inventory, like open a journal and like look for, whatever dates the entries were and try that. And, I kept doing that and it didn't work. So I eventually like backed out of the puzzle. And every time I opened like my inventory, there would be like in this game, if you pick up items, you can examine them. You'll like rotate them around and stuff. there was the uh object model of one of the journals just like floating there. Every time I opened my inventory, I would pull up another object to look at it. It would be superimposed over and inside of that journal, like no matter what I did. So I was like, oh no, is this it's just borked for the entire thing? So I burned a save ribbon to like run back to one of the safe rooms, save in a different slot,
Yeah.
and crossed my fingers, reloaded that save, and thankfully it was gone. But I was
Oh
worried
wow.
that I had just completely done something the developers hadn't intended, and it was just going to ruin the game from that point on.
Wow.
Um, there was that, and there was something with the final boss, but I don't necessarily want to spoil that right now. But I think
I
that may have
can't think
glitched
of
out on me.
anything like that that really happened with mine.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, no, I can't really think of anything like that.
gotcha.
I will say we were talking about maps. Was there a reason we couldn't get a map for like the last part of the game?
Tension, I
Like,
guess.
yeah, I guess. And it was true. Like once we got to figure out like the last, you did start to eventually get around the map pretty good by the end.
Hmm.
But when we were down in the sewers, there was a part where there actually was a part where I was lost and didn't know where to go. Because
Hmm.
not because I didn't know where to go, but because I thought I had gone everywhere.
Hmm.
Um, and I did pull up a walkthrough, and the walkthrough said, and I'm just pretty much quoting verbatim here, like, go down this, get these two items, go down the hallway further, get these two items, go down this hallway, and you'll be at the place. And I
Hmm.
had done the first two. I I thought I had done the second two, and I could find no place to go. And I was like, am I just dumb? Because there were a lot of paths down there, but the paths were all mostly very linear. You
Hmm.
know, it was like it dead ended at the end of a sidewalk or something down in the
Yep.
sewers. And eventually I did find some other, but I mean, even using a walkthrough, I was like, I don't know where I'm supposed to go right now. And I eventually found one item that was the second set of items they said. And I was like, oh shit,
Hmm.
like I didn't even get this whole thing I was supposed to be finding right now. And so I
Gotcha.
did eventually find it, but it was a weird thing. Like you had to like walk down to press against the bottom of the screen and then like turn and go to the right or something. And I was like, I didn't know the map went any further that way. Like
Hmm.
I can't see that. So I
Yeah.
did like the tension it built, but I was just like, I don't know where I'm supposed to be going right now. There's no place left to go.
Yeah, the last couple sections were very, very maze-like. There was in the final section, I don't know if I wouldn't necessarily want to spoil what that is, but there's a section with like a stairway that's broken in one spot, and then there's other parts of it that are intact. And I just with the way the camera was, I thought somehow I had taken like, a wrong turn where I could only get from like one floor to the other, but I forgot the other part of the stairway was down like a slight little bit of other hallway. And then you found that and you could actually keep going. I probably spent like half an hour trying to figure out how to get where I was trying to go because no map, and I wasn't sure like which floor the stairs ended on, and it was yeah, that could have been handled a little better.
I actually think that might be the same part I'm talking about.
Okay.
Because if it wasn't, it was extremely close to that because I remember like trying every path and then coming back and hitting that broken stairway again, and then I'd
Hmm.
try it again and I'd be back at the broken stairway, and I was like, what am I missing here?
Yeah, it's like I know there's a section where I unbolted a door so I could get through it, but that didn't lead where I thought it went, or I didn't think it led where I thought it went.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, I know I should be seeing like this hallway with this thing at the end of it, but I'm not seeing it. And where am I turning wrong? And yeah, I
Yeah.
was I was pretty lost for a while too. Um, so as long as you're, dear audience, as long as you're okay with exploring kind of blindly on occasion, I mean, the environments are well put together. They're very distinctive, very atmospheric, but some of them can start to look the same.
Yeah.
Um, but let's see. So I mean, yeah, overall, I think the mansion had a lot of character. Or the hospital, I should say, not just the mansion, but it had a lot of character. It had a lot of atmosphere. Um, and it looks like you're nodding in agreement on that.
Yeah, no,
What did you?
I would agree. When we first announced that we were going to do this one, like I think I told you I was trying to get a physical copy, but it was just a little bit more money to do that, so I didn't. But I'm even more curious now because the physical ones, I remember I told you came with a map of the hospital inside, like a
Huh,
physical map that you could unfold and like be like, welcome to blah
nice.
blah blah hospital.
That's
So
cool.
that's interesting because that must have, I assume, had all of the map chunks that you would have assembled as the
Oh,
game goes on.
probably, unless it was just
Um,
like the first floor, which would be weird.
Not that
But
that would be a big spoiler per se if it was just a hospital, but
yeah,
still kind of
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. What did you think of the enemy design?
I was just gonna say we got to talk about the enemies.
Yeah,
There's some pretty horrific creatures in this game. There's not a
yeah,
lot of variety with
true.
the enemies. There's maybe, I'm guessing here, maybe like 7 or 8 total types of enemies the whole game. Like there's not many.
Yeah, that
And you
sounds about
mostly
right.
see the same, three-ish types multiple times here and there.
Mhm.
Um, but I did like them. I liked them because as you found the journal entries, it kind of talked about like why those enemies existed more or less. Like
Mhm.
they had a little bit of backstory, like why they were there. They weren't just like they were horrific creations, but they kind of served their purpose in the bigger narrative, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, but I also they were really unique, I thought too. Like really like some, Todd McFarlane crazy
Yeah,
ass evil people type creations of men and machinery meshed together.
with a very
And
medical experiment kind of overarching
yeah,
theme. Yeah,
they
yeah,
were gruesome, but I really liked them for the most part. Each one felt like it was a threat.
yeah,
Um, Either
yeah.
if
It's like,
you didn't shoot fast enough, then you're like, fuck, I'm gonna get hit, or
mhm.
retreat or whatever. But I
And
liked
then
them.
there, yeah, and then there was the always the gamble of, okay, I knocked it down, but it's still alive. Can I switch to the crowbar and just beat this thing to death and save some ammo, or is it going to
Yep.
get up and like kill me?
Yeah.
So yeah, they were weird, they were creepy, and yeah, I agree that each one of them was dangerous.
It's a
I mean, aside
good
from
point
like when
on
you
the
got the
crowbar.
shotgun and yeah, like knocked him down with one hit. But yeah, the crowbar saved my life on more than one occasion because I actually had ammo.
Yeah, that was the actual gamble you took though. Like, do I do the crowbar on this guy or not? Because he
Yeah,
could get up.
yeah,
It was not
but
a guaranteed thing.
yeah. Um, what did you? I mean, without necessarily spoiling it, what did you think about the last boss? Like, did you feel it fits thematically with like the rest of the enemies? Did you feel like it was out of
Um,
place?
um, so here's my experience with the last boss. I was confused what to do on the last boss
Hmm.
because again, if you're not doing full spoilers here, you basically have like a giant creature and then you also have like some aspect of side work slash puzzling to go on, of course, as this is happening. And I very quickly, and perhaps this was my bad, assumed that you were supposed to go concentrate on the puzzle pieces. And so I was like going around the room trying to work on the puzzle pieces with any item I had and like using things, and nothing was doing anything. And I was like, I don't know. I was taking damage because you're getting hit basically the entire time, Mother Brain style from Metroid. And I was very frustrated. Like I was like, I don't know what to do with this final boss. And then once I finally figured out what you were supposed to do with the final boss, then it was interesting for another reason we'll talk about here in a second. But this was, it went from like, how do I beat this boss to, wow, that's a really easy boss for the end of this game.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Having you say that, yeah, this is why I think the fight glitched for me a bit because the puzzly parts. Basically there are smaller threats. Let's say it's to be a bit vague that are kind of around the parts of the puzzles you need to interact with. And
Yeah.
the first one of those, I went and I bludgeoned it to death with the crowbar, and I could access the puzzle behind it. After that, I probably, like ran laps around the arena for like 10 minutes trying to figure out what to do because the other threats around the other puzzle pieces weren't reacting to anything. Like they seemed like they were just sort of like slumped there, not doing anything. I couldn't like hit them with the crowbar. I didn't want to like waste bullets on, or like nails on them or anything. So eventually I grabbed, you get a kind of an electrified prod as a weapon later on. And I grabbed that and because I had some batteries left for it. And I'm like, I just jabbed it in the direction of one of the threats on the puzzle piece. And after that, I could access the puzzle piece, despite the fact that the thing didn't react at all. But all of a sudden, the prompt came up to interact. So I don't know if that was glitched out for me
What?
or what. Yeah, it was weird.
Okay, so I will say that when I couldn't figure out what to do, I may have taken a tiny peek at a walkthrough to figure
Okay.
out. And it's interesting because you're like describing a third experience here. So the
Oh,
walkthrough basically said once you do what it is that you actually need to do,
uh-huh.
then you go to the side puzzles, and yeah, it says you can use the
Oh,
crowbar
uh-huh.
or the electric thing. And
Okay.
so I went over with the crowbar and I must have hit that like sub enemy 50 times and it did nothing. It never
Huh.
changed. And I was like, okay, so that's not accurate at all. So I ended up having to
Huh.
have enough of the electric thing to be able to beat it because the crowbar never worked
Weird.
for me. So I don't know.
Yeah, the crowbar worked on the first one because that enemy was like up and like flailing around and stuff, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, it reacted when I hit it. The other after I took that one down and activated that first part of the puzzle, the others were just like bleh, just like not moving, not flailing, not being a threat, not reacting to anything. So in desperation, I jabbed him with the cattle prod, and suddenly, oh, I can press X to or A rather to access this. I'm going to do it, and yeah, it was a very weird and
Oh,
kind
that
of
is weird.
janky boss fight. Yeah. Um, and I don't really know if I like the way that you kill it because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense as to why the apparatus is set up as the way it is to be anyway, from what I remember. Again, I don't want to
Um,
spoil anything. It's
it was kind of questionable.
yeah, but
Um, all I
it
could think was that that was a leftover device from like how they made that area of the map, but then why would it
maybe
be there exactly? I don't know.
yeah, I still have questions about why the final boss was able to be woken up the way it was anyway, considering there's like this whole focus on twins and stuff throughout the game, unless
Yeah.
there's a lot I don't want to spoil because the game gets weird in terms of the narrative and
Yeah.
certain elements. Oh, actually, yeah. Obliquely moving over to one other aspect. So I mentioned the stuff with like the tapes where you could like go and access that element of the game. What did you feel about the mirrors? Because there are mirrors that you can interact with that do also strange things.
I liked a lot about this game, but I'm going to be honest when I say if it had been just a straight linear grounded haunted hospital with some sort of they had to change the plot I realized but somehow to just make this like a really grounded gritty horror game I think it would have been better for me. I
Okay.
once we started jumping through mirrors and doing a little bit of time traveling and stuff, I was like, I don't know about this. Like, I get why they did it for the plot. It kind of fleshes out the story and your character story and the hospital
It led
story in some ways,
it
but
led to at least one hell of a twist at one point. That
uh, I just
yeah.
I didn't I could have did without it to be honest. And I was confused. Like
Okay.
the first time I hit one of those and went through it, or maybe it was no, it had to be mirror. Yeah, it was the first mirror I went in because I think I texted the group chat. I
Oh
was like,
yeah.
Justin, what the hell is this? Like, what did I just
Uh-huh.
walk into? Which then I
I
thought it was going to be like Silent Hill,
mhm.
right? Where it's like this or that, but
Yeah, where
that
it's
was
like the
that
other
was
world versus the
yes,
real
which
world. Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
also thought would have been a really interesting way to go about it.
Mhm.
But that is also not exactly what it is. So
Yeah. I did like how the mirror world, for lack of a better term, did have like certain things that were different. Like there were in the real world, there might have been a door that was like had stuff like piled up in front of it, but it was accessible in the on the other side in the mirror world.
yeah,
So I mean, it did lead to some interesting situations, but I, yeah, thematically, I don't know how well it fit in. It made for an experience where you never were quite sure what to expect next, but not so much in a
very
oh
true.
this is well put together and so compactly designed, but more in a I don't have any sense of cohesion to any of this.
Mm.
Um, and I do think that with the what you find out about the main character and her connection to this place, that fills in a few of the gaps, but it still leaves a lot that's just kind of a question mark for me. Um, but
Yeah.
um, in light of, oh, go ahead.
I,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say too, like, you mentioned like non too spoiler here, but you get various VHS tapes at different points in the game that you can put into this player and project them on the screen, and more or less that's how you can access some different areas and different time periods. But that I also had a little issue with that because what the tapes were named, like,
Uh,
was where you transported to,
mhm.
but it had some of the times absolutely nothing to do with like what you were actually going there to do, because it was like for spoiler, minor spoiler, but one was like the dentist room, and I was like, oh shit, like we're gonna have a traumatic scene with a dentist, like this is gonna get out of hand, and it was like,
Mhm.
no, you warp there and then you walk out in the hallway, and you were like, what?
Yeah. There's even like a creature strapped to one of the dentist chairs and everything. It's like, oh no, I'm gonna have to like, you
Yeah,
know, reach into its mouth and do something. Nope, nope, it's a red herring.
just there.
Yeah. Yeah, I did question like how some of those were implemented too. I mean the twist that came from that particular tape I thought was really, really disturbing and
Mm.
one of the more memorable moments, but it raises so many questions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
so
I just wanted to mention a couple tiny, not really as a topic, but just some tiny little quibbles I had.
mhm,
And then we go back to topics too. But
sure.
just a play style, I just wanted to put out there because I don't know where else to stick it in on this podcast. But I did try this briefly in the portable mode on the Switch,
Hmm.
and it did it did fairly well. Like it actually translated to a much better experience handheld mode on that small screen than I would have guessed. Because I did play it like exclusively on my TV at night, just to try to really soak in the atmosphere. But
Hmm.
if I had known like how good it would have played, I probably would have had some more chances to play it with some time periods, or I could have squeezed in a little bit here or there. So if you're listening to this and you would play it portable, it actually did fairly well. Now that being said, my negative for the Switch performance on this one is there were a lot of rooms I'd walk into and I could notice the rendering happening. Where I
Ooh,
would see like the walls were this way and then like they'd glitter, and then like you'd get the layer on top of it and it was like, ooh, I always thought it was like
gotcha.
something in the game, like actually happening, like it was Silent Hill transforming for real or something.
Oh.
And then I was like, no, this is just like the detail layer that's coming after it by like a half
Oh,
second or something. So
oh, that's unfortunate.
just a couple
Um,
little things there.
yeah, I didn't really have any issues with that on the PC version. But yeah, I could see the certain areas definitely giving the Switch a bit of a run for its money. Um, but
Which I was a
that
little
said,
surprised by because there's not a lot of like there's very few slash none where areas where there's just like a ton of shit happening at once. So it's
yeah,
like,
but the backgrounds aren't pre-rendered. They're like actual 3D models, and some of them are pretty intricate. Like
mhm.
the whole like the main hall with the staircase and everything. That is a beautiful area, and yeah, I could see with all the interplay of light and just the fine details on some of like the railing and the stuff that's strewn about. I could see that causing some issues maybe,
Yeah.
and other rooms that in similar vein.
Despite that, I will say it still looked nice on the
Hmm,
Switch, but once the layer got there, which wasn't every room, but there were definitely some you could notice it.
that's fair. Um, yeah, that's looking through my list of pros and cons. I mean, I kind of went through them more topic by topic than straight up pro and con.
No, yeah.
But I think that's about all that I've got. I will say that the environments looked better than the human characters at least, because some of them, like compared to especially even to the monsters, the human characters looked a little
Yeah.
questionable.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's an interesting point. Yeah, the human characters, and they could have been different on the PC, but they didn't quite look like PlayStation Lara Croft bad, but there were some moments where you were like, wait a second, what is going
yeah,
on
it
with this
was
here?
okay. So yeah, they were definitely they seemed like they were almost done by a different team than like the rest of the game in terms of design work.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't look terrible by any means, but they didn't have the same level of polish and shine as the environments or even the monsters really.
Yeah.
Um, but uh, any other elements or topics you wanted to bring up
Yeah, I had
before
a
we
couple more I was kind of
go for it?
curious about here. This is just a small quibble, but um brings me into another topic I'm going to bring up here in just a second. But for the first, I would say two-thirds of the game, it was a very like grounded horror story, which we kind of talked about. Even with the like craziness of the mirrors and the tapes and stuff, it was still pretty grounded in like this
Mhm,
religious, cult, and then also like some science going on, and we have all these different elements of play. But there was
mhm.
like once in a while, and I didn't understand why the team did it. They just made a decision that like just took me out of that for like 1 second. And like a perfect example was like there was a part maybe like 2 or 3 hours into the game, and I can't remember where it was at exactly, but you're like walking down a hallway
Mhm.
and there's like I don't know if it's a morgue or like there was a part with dead bodies on the walls or something,
Oh
and like they
yeah,
like all start shaking as you're like walking past.
I forgot
And
about
like
that.
nothing in the game would explain what that is other than them just trying to make you jump as the player in the game. And I'm like,
That's
man, like that took me out of this tense moment that I was in. Like, yes, it was a jump scare, but like it just
Mhm.
doesn't make sense in this game.
I'd actually forgotten about that sequence, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, that was that was kind of cheesy.
There was like one or two, there wasn't many, but there was just like one or two. But I'm like, if you're, I don't know, like if they felt they needed that or what, I don't know. But
Yeah. But
um,
yeah, yeah, those definitely felt like they the game would have been just as spooky without them, I think. Just
the
add some like intense music and like let that build
oh yeah,
and
the music
yeah.
was good in the game too.
Yes.
Really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind having a soundtrack for this just to have like in the background while I'm reading or something. Just very, very heavily instrumental and just really well done.
yeah, agreed. Little haunting. Like the main theme, the save room theme, if you will, was kind of different. Like, there was some good
Yeah,
stuff in this game.
yeah.
I wanted to ask about. I won't go into spoilers here, but we
Mhm.
definitely get a new type of enemy about two-thirds of the way through the game. And it's the well, I don't want to say more modern, but because it wasn't some of the old Resident Evil games too, but like the pursuer enemy, if you will, that starts to chase you.
Mhm.
What the fuck? Come on.
I I'm going to tell you my experience with this. So, okay, I go into the room and it airs the cutscene where this thing appears and it starts like, floating towards me. And because of the fixed camera angles, I'm like, oh crap, I'm not sure exactly which way it's coming from, which way I'm facing. So I turn and run in a direction which leads me back out the door that I came through. I'm like, okay, it's still in there. Take out my shotgun and whatnot. I head back in and it's gone. And I'm like, well, that was weird. So I just kind of like, I'm tense for a while. I'm like looking around, waiting for it to like pop out from behind a shelf or something. Nothing happens. So I go through a few more rooms, and then the music changes, and I see this thing like gliding towards me down the hallway. I'm like, oh shit! So I don't even remember if I shot at it, but I like turned and ran so I could prepare myself. Go back into the hallway. It's gone. And at that point, I noticed the music is back to normal. So in my head, it clicked. It's like, oh, okay, this is just going to keep popping up. And if the music is different, it's going to be in the surrounding area. And if I leave and come back in, it's going to be gone again. Or if I hear the music is still weird, I know it's still there. So inadvertently, I ended up finding the cheesiest way around this enemy. I don't think I even had it take a swing at me because every time I heard that different music, I just like noped out through the door I came in and just went back in. So
That's interesting. What a different experience. Yes and no. So the room where it first appears, I was like, oh shit. And I like unloaded on this thing. Um, and I found out that if you knock it down three times. If you can knock it down, it knocks down, it knocks down, and it knocks down. If you knock it down the third time, it stays down.
Oh,
And
okay.
I'm like, oh sweet, I beat it. And then like it gets back up. And
Oh
I'm like,
no.
oh, okay, like that was one hit. Cool. So
Oh,
then
sure.
I'm like using all my bullet gun, my nail guns, and I'm using my shotgun bullets and all this shit. And they're
Mm.
like, nothing is working on this thing. And I'm like, I don't know if I can beat this thing. Like, I don't know what it's gonna take.
Oh,
P.S. If it gets too close to you, it like kind of humps you, and you have to like tap a button as fast as you can to get away.
okay.
And so finally, I was like, I can't beat this thing. So I left the room.
Mm.
And that is where I sank about a fourth of my ammo in this game was in that one room,
No
not
wonder I had
realizing.
ample ammo for the end.
Yes, and I mean, I was screwed on ammo for quite a while after that because I was like,
Oh,
and I really thought I could kill it. So I was using everything I had, you know?
gotcha.
And same as
Oh,
you, then afterwards, I realized quickly, like, oh, if this is in the room with me, I can just leave, come back in, and it's gone,
yep.
which doesn't
Oh,
make any sense at all.
if I hadn't accidentally like turned and headed backwards from where the camera put me and exited that room, I probably would have tried to kill it too. But it was just like a weird accident where because the it drops you into a fixed camera angle and I didn't know which way I was facing. I turned and ran, and the rest is history.
I would be
So
of any question in this game, I think I would be the most curious to ask one of the developers, like, what were you intending to do with this thing?
yeah,
Because everybody had to figure out, like, if you leave the room and come back in, it's gone. So in my head, I'm
yeah.
thinking, like, did you mean for it to still be there? Did you mean for it to pursue us? I actually
Mhm.
got in my head, and there's no way this is probably right, but I actually got in my head that every time you moved a room, it moved a room.
Mm.
And so, like, sometimes through process of just sheer math, like you'd end up back in the same room, and like then it would come after you and attack you.
Uh,
And other times you'd walk away and it went the other way, and then you didn't see it again for a really long time because
yeah.
it mostly did appear in hallways, but there were like some really, really tiny rooms that I walked into that it was like right there, and I was like, holy
Yep.
hell.
Yeah, I for a while I was trying to keep track of like how many rooms on average I could go through before it was popping up. For a while it seemed
Mm.
like three, and then it was like, well, no, it showed up after two this time, so it wasn't a hard and set rule.
Oh,
But
okay.
um,
Thought you could tell me there was a pattern I was missing. Maybe there
I
is. I don't
thought
know.
there might have been at one point, but no, it counter it was words. Yeah, it definitely showed me that I was thinking too much into it. I think it is kind of random. Um, but I think it would have been a lot more effective if if it could show up like while you were traversing a room, like instead of just immediately at the start, like you could go like partway through and then it might phase through a wall or like kick down a door or
Yeah.
something. That would have been a lot more effective.
It was also weird because it was, as you described earlier, like its art style was the character's art style, not the enemy's art style.
Yeah, yeah, it felt very
But like in the 60s when the cartoons were like superimposed and the main characters were like one style of art, 'cause they were bright and shiny, and then the background
yeah,
was like the detail, right?
yeah. It did feel like it was kind of offset from the world around it. I agree. Yeah.
It
And
just didn't, yeah,
it's
it just didn't feel like they tied in later, but it didn't feel
mhm.
like it belonged when it came out.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, it's the Michelin Man coming after me kind of a thing. And it's just this like big bloated kind of pale thing. Which it's like, okay, that's weird and I wasn't expecting it, but it didn't fit the rest of the overall aesthetic. Like even
Yes.
the big suited guys kind of made a bit more sense than visually than this thing.
Yeah,
Um,
right. And like everything again was very grounded in reality. Even
mhm,
when you did use the VHS tapes or go through the mirrors, like the world you ended in was still very real,
mhm,
with science and stuff. And then you had this
yeah.
thing which was just floating around the mansion, and you're like, what the
Yeah.
fuck is this thing? Like, why is this even here?
And I mean, there was some like in some of the journals you found, there was some talk of like mysticism and like ancient peoples and their
Mm.
rituals and stuff like that, including one of my favorite puzzles, which I'm not going to spoil, but it involves like trying to do something in a very dangerous environment, where you wake something up and you have to fight it in pretty tight confines.
Yeah.
I think you know which one. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but like putting it together and like seeing, through a window something that isn't there when you go into the room and then like tying it together with the notes, it's yeah, I really enjoyed that. So they did try to work in that like mystical supernatural element a bit, but it's kind of very much in fits and starts where they actually put it in there. There's that creature, there's the final boss, and then there's like the journal entries about like what was happening in the past and whatnot. So
I actually thought there was going to be more fights like the one you're kind of alluding to, where something
yeah,
wakes up. At. I thought there were going to be more of those because I was like, that was a really memorable, fun sequence.
it was. I didn't realize, at a glance that that creature was going to be as strong as it was because it looked very visually similar to some of the other enemies you fought. And then it awakens and it's like, oh God, I'm unloading into this thing and it's still coming at me. So yeah, yeah. I really do wish there were more moments like that because that was very tense, and it just really effective on a I don't want to do this, but I have to do this
Yeah.
kind of way. Um, so, but we'll see. Maybe the sequel will lean more into that. I really hope they do, and they take the best parts of this and like improve upon them and build on it.
Is the sequel, this is off topic, but can you lean one way or the other? Is the sequel more or less the same cast?
It's the same main character.
Oh, okay.
But let me
Interesting.
bring up the Steam description of it real quick. So Tormented Souls 2.
Think this would be a fun anthology if they would allow themselves to go in a different direction with each
Yeah.
game, but I know that's such a risk for developers these days.
Well, okay, it says Caroline Walker is back in an award-winning classic survival horror sequel. Uh, that's bold words considering it's not out yet, but explore eerie monasteries and and other nightmarish locations. Brace yourself and confront terrifying creatures armed only with makeshift weapons as you desperately try to rescue your cursed sister, is what it says.
Yeah,
Uh, but yeah, I'm just seeing if it says anything more about the setting.
interesting.
It mentions a monastery, so maybe it's
Ooh.
it's leaning more into the supernatural side of things. Um, da-da-da. As unnamed character falls victim to a mysterious affliction, coughing blood and experiencing blackened eyes and moments of unconsciousness. Conventional remedies prove futile. In a desperate bid to save her sister, Caroline must turn to the supernatural. So,
Okay.
okay. Um, yeah, I'm curious to see where they go with this
Hmm.
because like we were saying, there are so many elements to the first game that they kind of picked and chose from different branches of horror
Yeah.
that they could have gone with any of them, I think, and could be interesting if they do just go full bore into the supernatural side from this point on. Lean more into the weirdness with the mirrors and the time shifting VHS tapes and stuff. I mean,
So
it could be interesting.
wholly original plot where you have to fight creatures with only a camera that you must use to take their picture. Totally original. All right.
Do not steal.
Do not steal. I had a couple little quibbly quabbles here still.
Okay.
Two, and then I have a question for you, and then I just had one thing. I don't know if we can touch on or not, but
We'll see.
I may or may not. I think I did read this in one of the journals, although it doesn't really fully make sense. But we were referencing the office location earlier.
Mhm.
There is a dead body in that office. That's all I'll say on that matter. And then it disappears.
Oh yeah.
I think that is explained in one of the journals, perhaps. I think I may have saw a quick thing that was referencing that, but it also doesn't make
Yeah.
sense that it disappears so quickly and then somebody'd be like, let me stop and write journal on this quickly.
That's fair.
But I didn't know where that was going. I mean,
Yeah. That's not the only body that disappears either. There's the one
well,
early on where it's part of a puzzle with the heart. That's all I'm gonna say. That one disappears later on if you go back to that room. So I don't
okay.
know if like the creatures took that one
Oh,
or
weird.
what, but so yeah, I don't know if that's just kind of like you know, a nod that more is going on here than meets the eye or what, um
Not
but
to
yeah.
mention the every single pair of feet you see in the game.
Yeah. Uh, but you,
Um,
yeah, there was more you wanted to.
the other one I was there is a certain bedroom in the game, which I will leave sit at there, which has a door that you can't go through, though there is a text screen for it. And you never go through that door in the game. That drove me nuts. Oh my God.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, because I mentioned when we were talking about this leading up to this episode, that there was an item that I never used. So I
That was
thought,
the question I had for you next.
mhm.
What was
Oh,
that?
which item? The bolt cutters? When you okay, it's toward the
Wait,
end.
hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Hold the horses here.
Okay,
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 okay. You know which door I'm talking about then, obviously.
I think so. Yeah.
It's just, I can spoil. It's the same room that has the TV puzzle in it, so there's that.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
There's a door which they give you some text for, and you can't go through. And later, I assumed that's where you were going to go, and then that was not the case at all. This
Mhm.
is door you can't go through.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, and I looked online. You can't go through that door. It's just a thing,
Oh.
but kind of
Oh. Okay.
bizarro. Okay.
Sure.
Um, then that was my next question was what item you ended with. So you ended the game with the bolt cutters.
Yes, I had them in my possession. I wasn't sure where to use them. After I
Oh,
beat the last boss, stuff starts like breaking down in the mansion and you can't get the parts you could before. And it was just a matter of, well, I'm more or less done. The exit's right there. I'm just gonna go through and see what happens. So,
interesting. And you only played one inning, you said, right?
yes, so far.
Well, that was the other thing I was going to say. I don't know how much we can talk about with the endings, but
Yeah, because
so
I
you
assumed.
let me guess then. Oh, interesting. So you got the bolt cutters.
Mhm. While you ponder, I will say for the audience, I assumed that this was going to be like Silent Hill 2, where to get the other endings, you had to go back and play the game a different way. Because when you beat it and the credits roll, it gives you like a stat screen, like how many times you saved, how many creatures you killed, that sort of thing. And I figured those numbers, depending, reflected your play style, which in turn had an effect on the ending, which is how that worked in Silent Hill 2. So I looked at that and I thought, well, I like this game. I don't really want to play through it all again right now, so I just figured I would take the ending I got.
But spoiler, you can redo the last like half, less than half hour. Last if you saved in the
Oh
right
man.
spot, you can redo the last like 15 minutes, I would say, and get different endings.
Oh geez.
So I'm trying to. I don't want to spoil too much here for you then. So did you get the remorse ending?
Yes, I think it was Remorse. It was Remorse or like Forgotten or something like that. It was called
Oh,
Remorse.
those are two different endings.
I
So
think it was
maybe.
Forgotten.
Oh, wow, but
I think it's Forgotten.
huh?
Hang on, let me.
No, I don't. If you're gonna play through them, I don't want to talk about the other ones
I
and
mean, I
spoil
will
them.
at
But
some point. So
essentially, there's three endings in the game, and that
maybe it was
is
Forgetfulness, not Forgotten. Yeah, I think it was Forgetfulness. Yeah.
there's I don't know if I should say that.
Ooh, ooh.
The third one that we haven't mentioned is probably your hint for what you should have done with the bolt cutters. But
Okay.
yeah, so the first time I played through, I got the forgotten ending, and
Mhm.
I never got the bolt cutters, Justin, because here's what
Oh,
happened to me at the end of the game.
okay.
I got through the fight with the big dudes with the hammers,
Hmm.
and then you walk up the stairs and you see something there.
Uh-huh.
And I, for
You
some
didn't use
reason,
the item on the something?
no,
Oh,
I didn't because
oh.
I thought I probably should have because I figured that that's what that item was for like hours, right? But
Mhm.
for some reason, I was like, I am going to use this handy little scalpel that they still have in my inventory and try to uncut this person from the thing.
Oh,
And I tried, and it like didn't register as like an item that would work. And I tried the other
okay.
side, and that didn't register that it worked. And then apparently I must have tried it someplace else, and it promptly slit the throat of the thing that is there.
Oh, oh,
And it died right there.
okay, okay.
Which, if you got the bolt cutters, you know how you get the where they come from. So
Yep.
I never got the bolt cutters. I went
Interesting.
in and fought the final boss, and basically basically that's so interesting. I basically beat the final boss, went to where you need the bolt cutters,
Oh,
and then that didn't work because I didn't have the bolt
bullet
cutters.
cutters.
And then I left the mansion, and that was the end of my game the first time
Oh,
through. And I was like, I bet that wasn't what I was supposed to do.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
So,
Yeah, I very nearly didn't use the item that I did use on that person because there was a chance I thought I might need it for myself. Like something was going to happen in the final sequence where it was me or that person, and I was going to need to use it on myself instead. But I decided to be selfless and used it on the person, and that whole thing happened. And
hmm.
yeah,
This
so
will be a good way to solve which ending you got. When you
yeah,
went to the front door to leave
yeah,
and you put the key in
yeah.
and you looked outside, did anything happen or did you just walk outside?
I just walked outside. It was a
Uh,
bright sunny day,
Okay, you
and
got
yeah.
forgotten then. You got
Okay,
forgotten
okay,
for sure.
okay.
Yeah, interesting.
Interesting.
So I did try all three of the endings. One is a quote unquote good ending, I would say, and the other two are not as good, but
Okay.
or downright bad, I should say, probably.
Okay.
Forgotten's kind of the middle of the three, I would say.
Okay. At least I didn't get the bad
There
one
is
for
yeah,
once.
there is a worse ending and there is a better ending.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that I didn't enjoy the worst ending the most, which is interesting.
Ooh.
So
Well,
you'll have to try those and get back to me what you thought of the other two.
yeah, now that I know I don't have to go through the entire game again, yeah, I'll have to give that a shot in the near future.
Yeah, because
Okay.
that's fun. That's so funny because when I went to where I thought you were gonna have to go
Mhm.
after beating the final boss, I was like, I can't do anything. What am I supposed to do here? Like this is whatever.
Ah,
Not.
interesting.
And then once I finished the game, then I was like, I'll look at a walkthrough, and then I was like, oh, there's a bolt cutter in this game. Look at that. That's interesting too. That should make sense. I guess I should have figured that because the whole time I was playing, I was watching my inventory and being like, which item didn't he use?
Gotcha.
Interesting. Because there was a couple like you did a very brief thing with, and then they like kept
Mhm.
in your inventory, and I was like, did I use
Yeah,
this?
which
I think I used this.
yeah, including like there's one at the very beginning of the game that you pick up and you just carry it with you until
Yeah.
pretty close to the end, and it's like, oh, that actually is really clever. I'm glad I decided to take this random
Yeah.
this thing off of the shelf.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
pretty good.
yeah.
That was good.
Uh,
Well, that's all I got on my end.
all right. Yeah. Are we ready to rate this thing?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure. You want me to go first, or do you want to?
I feel like you've been going first. I can go on this one.
Sure.
So, just real quick, because I think we did a nice comprehensive job on this, minimizing spoilers as well. Biggest issues I had with the game were the mapping for the buttons on the Switch. Like, I don't know if I could have redone that on the options or not, but I didn't see an option to do that. If so, especially because it shows that it's on the other button and it wasn't. So, the jumping in and out of the map whenever there was a tense chase scene, that was a huge problem for me in this one. I didn't mind so much the rendering issues, but they were noticeable, I will say, and that's not always the case, even on a game for the Switch. The monster that I spent a quarter of my ammo in the game on without realizing that I was going to lose all that and never have anything to show for it, that was a problem as well. The camera angles at times were troublesome in this also, I will say. But that all being said, I really love the lighting effects in this game and the use of darkness with the Well, even when you had the flashlight, the lighter was good, but the flashlight was still pretty good too because it wasn't like you had an orb around you. It was like you were still looking only in the direction that it was pointing in. I thought that was pretty cool. And as I mentioned, one of the best compliments I can give this game is I thought it had just a near razor thin, perfect balance of health and ammo and map where you could go to in the upgrades too, which there was only a couple items you got in this game, but like when I found shotgun piece B and I had never found shotgun piece A, I was like, oh, I am an idiot. What did I do wrong in this game? And how many pieces are there? Like, what did I Anyway, but that was fantastic. I thought it was a really fun throwback. There were some wacky story elements to this, but honestly, I was super excited to jump back into this every time I played it. And that's like really is, maybe I've said before in some of these podcasts, that's about the highest compliment I can give a game because if I'm dreading going back into the world, then it means I'm not enjoying it at all. But this one, I was so excited to get in. I was scared. I was tense. Other than the one night my daughter was in the room with me and was like narrating everything that was happening on screen. And I was like, you are destroying the total tone right now. Get out of here. But this was a lot of fun. So if those other issues had been shored up, this would have been a really, really high game. As it stands, it is still a really high game, Justin. I am giving this one an 8.5 out of 10. Really
Nice.
enjoyed my time.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. You and I didn't have the same sorts of technical issues you did, but I did have some that you didn't, like with the glitch with the
Yeah,
journal that was like floating there. Um,
so
so
weird.
I mean, I will echo your sentiment that this was a very enjoyable experience when it worked right. Like, I went into it thinking, oh, it's gonna be one of those shovelware survival horror games from a small indie studio
Hmm.
that you see a dime a dozen on Steam, or the eShop or whatever. It's gonna be like a couple hours long and that's it. And but no, no, the more I got into it, the more it's like, oh, they put thought into this. Like the environments were really well crafted. Yeah, I mean the backtracking at times was a little much, but it felt like it made sense. The puzzles were fantastic, I thought, minus the freaking phonograph one. I hated that puzzle, but everything else was really well and thoughtfully put together. The combats, if it hadn't been for the camera angles, I would have liked it a bit more, but as it is like firing five nails into a wall and then realizing, oh, there's nothing there. That was kind of crappy, but um I think it did okay in trying to meld old school design aesthetics with new school controls. Hopefully they tighten that up a bit in the sequel. But I gotta say, for a game that came out and I heard, it was briefly on my radar, and then I heard nothing about it, and then finally decided to play it years later. I was really impressed. Like I was not expecting to be wowed by, I think this is the studio's first game too.
Oh,
Correct me
wow.
if I'm wrong. But yeah, it just from a small studio for this being like one of their initial offerings, that is very impressive. Um, so yeah, it has some rough edges, but I loved this. Um, I gotta say some few small issues, but overall, very solid horror game. If you like this genre, you will enjoy this. I can almost guarantee it. 8 out of 10. It's
Okay.
I have played better. I've played a whole lot of worse ones. But yeah, this is one that is worth checking out. And yeah, yeah, I am very excited for the sequel when it drops.
That's a good point about it could have just been a terrible shovelware game because you're right. There's so many that you look at the little description of and you're like, this is going to be awful. Like I would never buy that. Or you buy it and you're like, wow, this is bad.
Yeah, I
Uh,
I have wasted some money on games like that, and it's like, why was I thinking?
yeah, honestly, I didn't even consider because you kind of recommended it, that this could have been one of those type of games, but you definitely could have been one of those type of games. Oh, I was going to mention too. That was funny. I just thought of this, and you were mentioning shooting nails at the wall. The
Yeah,
the only enemy I think in the whole game that it glitched when I was trying to attack was the final boss. I would
really.
stand. Yeah, there were certain spots that if you stood by the railing and shot, didn't register that I was being hit.
Oh,
You had to
huh.
like physically move like to the next camera angle around the corner, and then like if suddenly it was like, oh yeah, you're hitting the final boss, and you're like, well,
Weird.
I was standing closer over there, and okay.
That's when you're dealing with like those sorts of camera angles. I guess that is the risk you kind of take, but it's still not as bad as I always think back to the first Dark Souls, where if you were using a bow and you were trying to like aim over a railing, your entire aiming reticle could be above the railing. You'd shoot the arrow and it would just be like stuck in midair, like because the collision
Oh,
detection said it hit the railing. So,
midair. Oh no,
yep.
that's even worse.
But
Goodness.
I mean, that is probably the worst like collision detection for projectiles I've ever seen. Um, but all things considered, yeah, this is a really good game. It is, I think, like $20 these days, I want to say. Let me double check on that.
Yeah, I think I paid like 20 or might even have been on sale for 16 or something.
Yeah, so I mean, for a budget title, yeah, you cannot go wrong throwing $20 at this. It's like, what would you say, 7, 8 hours long?
My
Uh,
file clocked in at like 12 and a half, so I don't know if
okay,
I mean there
maybe,
could have been like a time I was
yeah. If
sitting
you
with
don't
it on pause or something, but
Yeah, I think my save was around like maybe 10, but I attributed some of that to, backtracking and getting lost and not necessarily knowing where to go.
yeah, that's
Um,
true.
but yeah, it's a good return on, your investment versus hours that it provides. Those hours are very worthwhile, I would say. Yeah, the voice acting is kind of crappy, but so was the original Resident Evil. I
I
mean,
thought that was on purpose, and it seems like I'm reading online people are very conflicted whether it is on purpose or not.
yeah, I just attribute it to being a small foreign studio that worked on it. Maybe they couldn't afford really top-notch voice actors,
Oh,
so
I
they
don't
went with
know.
what they could. I don't know.
I'm gonna lean the other way. I think they purposely made it like
They
that.
might have, but yeah,
I couldn't even duplicate it because the girl would like emphasize the most random words in her sentences, which I don't even think that's not
it
even like a speech pattern. I couldn't even do that. I don't know how they did
it was
it.
kind of like watching Troll 2, where the if you've seen that movie, you know how the characters talked in that. It felt very reminiscent of that at times.
Welcome to the
Um,
Fond Pod.
Father, what are you doing here? Kind
Yeah.
of a thing. It's just like yeah, but no, this one is definitely worth checking out. It's yeah, I think we've kind of said what we need to say about it.
Yeah, good
Especially like for
story.
spooky season. Yeah. Even if you don't find it on sale, $20 is a very reasonable price for this. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's about it. So uh are we still doing the like the but wait, there's more style questions at the end of these at all or not?
Some of them not. Just depends on what we're on.
Okay.
We've been throwing
All
some
right. So
random things
so
out.
sure.
Oh
So
boy.
Cody, you receive a strange letter in the mail, and it seems to be really hinting that there's a very important reason to go to a location. You go there,
Okay.
someone knocks you out, you wake up in a tub, and you're missing some sort of body part. What body
Oh.
part are you missing?
Oh. Wow. I I am missing my anus because it's been stitched over and surgically grafted together, and I know that it's only a matter of time before I eat too much food and it's going to start to compound up and I will eventually die, but I have to solve the mystery before that happens.
But wait, there's more.
Oh
What
boy.
if what if the only person who can solve your dilemma is hidden in the place that in the bowels of the building you find yourself? And what if that person is the crazy doctor from Human Centipede?
Oh, well, he would be really angry because I'd be basically useless to him unless I was at the end of the. I guess he could still find a spot for me at the end of the centipede, but I'd probably be more used to him if I was a double option on here. So I'd still let him. I'd listen to his sales pitch, see what he's got to say.
All right. There you have it, folks. Enjoy spooky season as it continues trudging along, and that's it for another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing.
Next week, our
Have a good night.
scariest episode, The Rings of Power Season 2. Justin, are you going to be on that one?
I no, I can't subject myself to more of that show. I tried, and it's just I have limits.
Fair enough.
Uh,
Well, then we got Blair Witch Project after that. 25 years.
yeah, that one I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, me too. I watched that in a hot minute too, so maybe I'll make my kids watch them.
There you go. Yeah.
We'll see. All right,
All right.
sounds good.
Well,
Take care, everybody.
yep. Bye.
Hey, fondlings and fondlers. This has been another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, your favorite podcast. It's most people's favorite podcasts, or at least so my mom tells me. You can check us out all over the place online at our homepage, www.fondpod.com or fondpodcast.com. You can also check us out across your social media sites, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your streamed podcast. Thanks so much.